Hey, welcome to Thoughtseize Interviews, the show where we seize the thoughts of our guests while playing games of Magic the Gathering. I'm your host, Lucas Frank. With me is my co-host, Zachary Cole-Smith, and today we're joined by Bryan Gottlieb, co-host of the Arena Decklist podcast, broadcaster of the Star City Games Tour, and writer for StarCityGames.com. Bryan, welcome to the show.
Thank you. I have been a fan of your show for a while now. I'm quite happy to come on. You usually have way more interesting guests than me. I'm sorry to kind of bring down the level a little bit this week. Hopefully your fans will still stick around.
That's not true. We're very excited to have you. And the impetus for our show is very much because we're fans of your podcast. And I think that you were talking and you were doing like a questionnaire episode where fans of the show were asking you guys what you'd like, what kind of content you'd like to see. And you're like, I'd love to see like a music-based stream. And I was like, I think Cole and I are pretty qualified to do.
Oh my God, that was why you started the show.
Yeah. So that was a huge part of the reason. That, and I had started just interviewing people for fun. And I was like, we should do now. Once the pandemic hit, I was like, now is the time to do this. So, and you helped us iron out some technical difficulties early on that we were having. So this show has you to thank for a lot of it. So.
Well, I promise you I deserve zero of that credit, but I still appreciate it. And I'm happy if I had any small role whatsoever in inspiring you guys to get together and make this cast. Because like I said, I think you're doing a really good job with it.
Thanks, wow. Bryan.
Thank you.
We ask this of all of our guests, so I'll ask it to you. Are you familiar with the game of Magic the Gathering at all?
I have a passing familiarity. I have only played for 26 years or so, and only somehow ended up with it as my career, despite having so many other things going on. And it is, it's part of my life, I would say.
Talk a little bit about your journey to the somewhat culty world of Magic the Gathering. How'd you end up here?
So it's really a pretty straightforward origin story. As far as like 1994, 95 origin stories go, I had an aunt who has unfortunately since passed away, but she was very into like, I guess, nerd culture of the 90s. She was her husband made like small pewter figurines, and they worked together at Renaissance fairs. And my side of the family wasn't particularly close with them, but she did like occasionally come to visit, talking like once every 3 or 4 years. And she just showed up. It was either 94 or 95. I don't have the exact dates nailed down, but she showed up at our house, and her husband brought Magic cards with her. And I was like, what is that? And she's like, it's too complicated. I'm not going to teach you. So obviously I wanted to know more than anything else on the planet. And at that point, just like hunting down Magic cards became the thing I needed to do. And it was hard because I grew up in the middle of nowhere, basically. And you just couldn't find Magic cards where I lived at that point in time. And finally, I'd start getting some leads here. I'd hear they were, in this mall 45 minutes away, and started getting some collections together. And then that same aunt sent me a bunch of her cards that she wasn't using. And it just snowballed from there. And we were off to the races.
The cards of that era, the artwork, the aesthetic of the game, I find really mysterious and alluring, more so than it is today. I think, I know there's a lot of like nostalgia that happens with this game, but something about that era, I totally understand that hook of like, what is this thing? This is so strange and unique and eerie and kind of adult feeling almost. The cards are creepy and violent sometimes.
No, I agree with you so much. And like you said, all of this is going to be colored by nostalgia. Like certainly if you hold an old Magic card up to a new Magic card, I think 99 out of 100 people who aren't familiar with the game will just be like, yeah, the new Magic card looks way better. Like totally. The art's better, the formatting's better, everything about it is better. But when I look at old Magic cards, it hits different. It feels completely different to me. And it has that kind of, I don't want to say low budget, because it wasn't really like a low budget game, but it's just got like that grimy 90s nerd aesthetic that yes, it spoke to me at the time, and it still speaks to me. I seriously sit and just look at old Magic cards sometimes. I just love them, and I love everything about them.
Us too. Cole and I once missed a GP Vegas by a day, but we spent the whole time just wandering around, hanging out with the artists, I think we got some Anson Maddox stuff, I think, and that era of like, the Sengir Vampire type, Llanowar Elves, when they're just paintings.
So many iconic pieces from that era.
Yeah.
So Bryan, speaking of old Magic cards, like in terms of the deck selection, we try to pick decks that's in some way, are related to to our guests, but like we also like to play decks that are bad. And I think especially playing with like a seasoned player like yourself, we had to set the bar very low. Usually I give the deck description, and I kind of would like it if you would give a little bit of an introduction to this deck.
Okay. Oh Lord, I can't believe you found this one. Oh,
so what do we have here?
This is just your classic 3-color, 3 Mutavault, use Bloom Tender to fix your mana, ramp into Realm Raiser. Some Planeswalkers are also there too, though. Just a pretty standard Woolly Thoktar deck from, I think, 2010, if I had to guess.
This was 2008.
Oh, it's really that old. Oh, yeah, you're right. Because it was when I lived in Las Vegas. This is a deck I top-aided Nevada States with. It was my first ever tournament success of any kind. And honestly, I should have known that I had potential then, because if I was able to do any winning with this deck whatsoever, I just must be gifted at this game, right? Like, there's no way you can get by playing cards like this unless you have some kind of hidden talent. And I guess I tapped deeply into that hidden talent to go ahead and get a decent result with this deck. I mean, to be fair, it was a pretty small tournament. There's probably only like 50 some people there. And I did lose in the top 8 to Fairies, which you could have been playing in this format. But instead I played this for some reason.
Well, I think just as like a test of, the evolution of the game, we wanted to just see what happens if we queue this deck into a Modern League today. I
am fascinated to see what happens. I assume we'll lose a lot. That's kind of what I'm anticipating happening. But there's like powerful things this deck can do. If you go Figure of Destiny into Bloom Tender, you're accelerating. You're doing some pretty real things. I don't think they line up with anything that's going on in Modern, but we'll just have to see how it goes.
We got Kitchen Finks, to gain us a little bit of life. I'm really can't wait to Realm Raiser with a Dryad and a Valakut on the battlefield and just kill ourselves. I'm very, very excited for that to happen.
I'm trying to think what we could I'm just trying to come up with one Modern deck that we could conceivably beat with this.
Cole sent a screenshot to the Magic group chat today, and it was like proof that you should never play Grixis in Modern.
Okay,
he took down Grixis Luris.
I believe we could beat Grixis. Yep.
Yeah.
That's about it.
Yeah, sad. I used to be like such a committed Grixis player, and you just
me too.
Can't do it anymore.
Yeah, it doesn't feel quite as good these days.
No, but so we are a music magic crossover show. So I wanted to ask you about your sort of your music origin story, I guess, so to speak, your relationship to music these days. You've mentioned on your Arena Decklist podcast your love of music. And I think you may have even worked at a music venue at one point. Is that correct?
That is correct. I've played music my whole life. I love music. I used to bartend at this venue. I would have kept that hand, by the way. That's as good as it gets. It's not going to get any better than that. I used to bartend at this venue, and we were in this weird transition phase while I was there of moving between like a traditional nightclub, and the new owners who had taken over really wanted to do music venue stuff. And our sizing was just in this kind of sweet spot where we got bands on the come up, who you hadn't really quite heard of them, and then a lot of them went on to be like pretty significant. Like actually, of Monsters and Men played our venue. Jason Derulo actually played our venue once, which yeah, I mean he's like kind of a superstar now, so that was interesting. And then we also got a lot of old bands that I grew up with, so I got to see like Sponge play in our venue, and I liked Sponge when I was a kid. Like they were definitely like one of my favorite bands. And who else? I got to do shots with like Ed Kowalczyk from Live, who Live was tremendous at one point, right? Like that was legitimately a huge band. And so you kind of caught them on the come down, but it's still significant to me to have like interactions with these musicians that I really enjoyed growing up.
Where was the venue? What was it called?
It was in Albany, New York. It was called Jillian's, and it has since closed down. It closed down probably about 7 years ago. I mean, it's something new now, but the original venue disappeared. Just a tough time for businesses down in that area, and didn't quite make it through.
Yeah, absolutely. During the pandemic, there's been a lot of speculation from labels and music publications about how people's music consumption has changed, like trying to sort of identify trends within the pandemic to, I suppose, capitalize on. But have you noticed any difference with how you engage with music during the pandemic?
Well, so the biggest shift is that I am very much into attending concerts. Like that is a foundational part of my life. I can't even guess how many shows I've been to as an attendee, to say nothing of like the ones that were part of the venue I was in. So losing access to that has been, I mean, there's so many troubling things with the pandemic, but I feel that on a fairly regular basis. Like I just have these thoughts like, oh, I was supposed to go to this concert and I was supposed to go to this concert and they're canceled. And it's been ages since I've been in, a rundown venue. And, I've only lived in Seattle for 3 years now, but Seattle's music scene is great, especially when it comes to metal. And there's so many like cool venues to just see shows in. And I've been to a bunch of them, but there's a lot I'm not ever going to get to go to because I'm leaving shortly, and it's disappointing. It's real disappointing.
I think the three of us were at, just as an aside, I think the three of us were at the same Deaf Heaven show in LA at the Wiltern. I think we were all there the same night.
I was absolutely there. It was when there was a GP in LA, and I was like, I had seen Deaf Heaven 2 days prior when they were in Seattle, I think, or 3 days prior, whatever. But I will always take the chance to see them. And also the Wiltern was awesome. I had never been there before.
Fantastic venue.
Yeah, it was cool to get to check that out.
Who was opening for them? That wasn't Baroness. When you were touring with, it was Baroness.
No, it wasn't the Baroness tour, because I saw that tour elsewhere. It was actually Drab Majesty, who I fell in love with. I thought they were incredible. And one other band too, whose name escapes me, but Drab Majesty in particular, I thought was excellent.
That's awesome.
Would you imagine that you're one of the few people to have 2 Taylor Swift albums and the Emma Ruth Rundle Thou record in your top 5 albums of the year last year?
I don't know that that's like that weird. To me, those are just like clearly the best albums that were made, and it's not even that close to me. And obviously music is so subjective that I get while saying that people are going to have way different opinions, but I don't know. I have never put stock in musical archetypes. Like I just love the music I love, and that's all that matters to me. And if I don't care who you are, if you make a great album, I'm going to listen to it to death.
Well, speaking of archetypes, we always talk about decks, and magic decks in terms of archetypes. And Cole and I always think of, like Gristlebrand decks are clearly the most punk rock archetype in Magic, in our opinion. Is there a music genre analog to one of your pet decks, like Primeval Titan? Would you find a music, genre archetype analog to a deck like that? It
feels very jam bandy to me, where like it can go on for a period of time, and you're kind of just like looping around a little bit, and you got this earthy, crunchy vibe going on with Primeval Titan. So I think that's how I have to lean with it. And there's some like improvisation too. You get yourself caught in weird spots where you can't get the mana you need, and you have to figure out how to order your amulet triggers and all these very intricate things. But when it all comes together, it just flows out very smoothly and the games feel almost easy. And I think jam bands have a lot of the same stuff going on.
I love that answer so much. Cole and I can't stand Primeval Titan decks, to be perfectly honest.
Excellent.
Really,
I mean, I get it. Look, a lot of my deck selection is always going to be driven by what is the best possible thing to be doing. I know that's hard to believe given the deck that's on your screen right now, but things have changed in the last 13 years. And I think Primeval Titan has been one of the best things to do in Modern for a very long time. So,
yeah, it's a super powerful deck for sure. And seems to just continue to get upgrades all the time, which I can't understand. If you had to come up, sort of in the same vein, if you had to come up with an album that you feel encapsulates these Magic sets that I'm going to name to you, what would you pair for each one of these sets? So like, for example, what album would you pair to encapsulate the tone of the Magic set, Throne of Eldraine?
Be something by like maybe Spirit Adrift or like Chemists. I could see both working with Throne of Eldraine. I think there's kind of like a larger than life epic fantasy vibe through both of their music that sort of hits for me. I want something like a little bit more lighthearted, but I don't listen to too much lighthearted stuff. I know it's surprising having Taylor Swift on the top of my album of the year list, but
hey, that's heavy stuff, man.
Yeah, I'm like 60% pleased with that answer. I don't know if it's spot on, but
I think it's Kanye's My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy.
Okay. Yeah, I like that.
Okay, how about Ravnica?
So I think the guild I identify the most with in Ravnica is Golgari. And it's real easy to come up with Golgari music, right? Like I think that's a very clearly defined metal archetype. So in that case, something like Tomb Mold maybe speaks to me, where you're really honing in on that part of the equation.
All right, last one, Mirrodin.
Ooh, this is a little proggy, right?
Yeah.
And another band I really love, Coheed and Cambria. I think they fit with that whole Mirrodin vibe, like experimental a little bit, certainly willing to get a little violent and brutal, but also constantly looking for melody in all of their riffs. So I could see that working.
There's something futuristic to Mirrodin for me too.
Yeah, I buy that.
Great
up,
question
Cole?
and great answers.
Yeah, it's really strong answers.
So I guess like going off the archetypes thing, you know, we've interviewed a bunch of musicians on the show, and we've read a lot of like the press coverage of them, like before the show. And it feels like in music press, there's this tendency to place musicians' personas into these like archetypes, you know, like the slacker, the goth, whatever. But then like interviewing them or speaking to them as people, there's like very little of that. You know, people are people, and people are complex and contradictory or whatever. But in the world of gaming, are there these kind of like archetypal personas that people or players like will play up or like embody?
I think that oftentimes when that is happening, it's sort of marketing. And not to say it's not genuine, but you're incentivized as a content creator, or even if you're just like in the space, you're incentivized to always have a brand. And certainly like I overstate aspects of my personality because it's what I've become known for, and it's what people identify me with or appreciate about me. So I'm willing to play into it. I will never not present a genuine self to people. I think it's very important that you're true to yourself all the time, but I don't have any problem with playing up an aspect of my personality. I think a lot of people in the Magic space do the same things, especially once they're in the content creation scene. And certainly like there's common threads you're able to put with players. Like we all know the player who's easily frustrated by losing, and we all know the player who doesn't really care about the end result. It's just how you get there. So we've come across it all. I think that it can be both a marketing gimmick and just like the fact of the world that we kind of all fall into predictable patterns sometimes.
What are some of the things that you feel are like, you know, Gottliebisms that you're that you've kind of become known for, would you say?
Buying magic cards, I think, is a huge portion of my brand, I would say. And I think that that's just me expressing my appreciation for the game. And it's also me coming from a place where for the longest time I couldn't do that. I was so poor growing up, and it was hard for me to get magic cards, and I had to look and stare at these things. This thing I loved more than anything else in the entire world. Like, I just wanted every magic card in my possession. I wanted to travel to tournaments, and I wanted to build every deck, and I couldn't do that. And then through good fortune, my life played out in such a way that I can do that now. And I just kind of lean into the love for it. And I think sometimes maybe it comes off in a way like, oh, look at this thing I bought. That's not really what I'm trying to do. It's just like, I really like these things, and I'm happy I get to share my joy of these things with other people.
I'm going to skip ahead, Cole, and ask something while we're on topic. You have kind of you've talked about how you have an unusual way of physically playing the game of Magic the Gathering, which you said can work in your favor in instances where, people underestimate you when you sit down across from them. For some of our, viewers who aren't big Magic players, there's a lot of physicality to the game that you can infer things about your opponent sometimes. But in this case, you're talking about how that's kind of that can work in your favor. How would you describe your play style overall as a Magic player? And now that you're kind of this spiky, go wherever the wind goes type player, is there still something that draws you to the game other than, or that you identify with more, other than sort of the what the best thing to be doing is?
Yeah, so there's two aspects that I can answer that question with. There's the actual physical aspect of like handling cards, where I think I'm just generally awkward and I look like an idiot, and that's who I am. And I don't know why that's the way I have come out in this world, but it is what it is. And I understand why people take it as a sign of like not being comfortable with the game or not really understanding what's going on. But all I can do is use that to my advantage. So that's what the physical space is all about. When it comes to the deck building space, at this point, I don't care about actual results. Like, I don't care about winning tournaments. I very rarely play tournaments at this point. I'm not trying to qualify for pro tours anymore. It's not an active goal of mine. I just kind of take things as they come. So what drives me in this moment is the process of discovery and learning things, both for myself and to teach other people. And even more so to teach other people and to just share knowledge and to see people accomplish their goals. And that's another hard thing about this pandemic for me, is that a lot of our focus on kind of, I wouldn't say our content has changed its focus, but on the goals of the content have certainly changed, where we're trying to get people qualified for the Pro Tour. Like, that was always what our podcast existed to do. We wanted you to be able to achieve whatever your dreams were in Magic. And a lot of people's dreams in Magic just went away in all of this because you can't really participate in the way you did before. So we used to get a bunch of DMs from people saying, oh, I took your advice and I qualified for my first ever Pro Tour and I'm so excited and it means so much to me. Thank you. Those are gone now. And I don't think it's like, I mean, maybe it's somewhat our fault. I'm not going to absolve ourselves of responsibility, and maybe our content isn't as good. That's certainly a possibility, but I think it probably has way more to do with the fact that those opportunities just don't really exist for a lot of people right now. And that's been a really tough adjustment.
Totally. Magic is there's so much variance in Magic that having goals like that can be kind of a crushing thing. I mean, when we had Patrick Sullivan on, he was talking about sort of the crushing nature of the game at times, and how it's the game isn't, much like this great nation, not necessarily a meritocracy, or, there are oftentimes you can play better than your opponent and still lose, or make the right choices and still lose. So, running a show where you're working within this kind of nebulous, where you have, the data you're given to work with is tampered with, and all these different things. It's such a hard thing that you guys do on that podcast. But anyway, I'm getting sidetracked a little bit. I want to talk about that later. You are a seasoned gamer in more fields than just Magic the Gathering. You engage in nerd culture pretty heavily, be it anime, video games, comic books, etc. Do you feel that the world of gaming, which our parents' generation seems to always have told us was this waste of time and bad for our brains, etc., do you believe it's truly just mindless escapism, or has the world evolved to be more the world of gaming, that is, involved to be more engaging and stimulating than just something that kind of shuts our brains off?
Yeah, look, as a person, I am incapable of shutting my brain off. I need to be doing something all the time. And it can't be passive either. I need to be engaged, thinking about problems, solving problems, trying to accomplish something. It's hard for me to watch TV unless it's late at night. Like, that's really the only time I settle in and watch television, is when I'm tired and I'm ready to kind of wind my body down. During the day, it's not something I really engage in because it's too passive. I need to be stimulated. And the only way you could argue that basically all types of games, board games, card games, video games, aren't achieving that goal is if you're just not participating at this point. Like, it's so clear there's so much more than they were decades ago. But even then, there was like a good case where if you were willing to put in the work, you could always take more away from a game. Even the most basic, like Atari games, you could pull something from how basic they actually were and think about like the foundations of game design at that moment. And that's what's always going on for me with gaming. There's always a combination of, how do I win at this thing? How has this thing been created? What are the developers' goals? What are they trying to accomplish here? All those things are always going on for me. And I think gaming is such a worthwhile pursuit, both in terms of like filling your time and also just training you to do so many things. Like, my gaming experience has been so important in all of my other careers. It has translated very, very well in both opportunities and like raw experience. So I always bristle when people are like either ashamed of their gaming background or don't fully embrace it. Like, I see a lot of people be like, oh, I'm trying to apply for this job, and I spent the last 10 years playing Magic. How can I possibly do this? Well, talk about playing Magic and what it's taught you and what you've taken away from that. And I think that's a completely fine place to be in life.
And that's not even to begin to cover the community aspect of a game like Magic, where you're building a larger world, so to speak, for yourself.
Right.
I mean,
go ahead, Cole.
Like, just kind of talking about the, like the ways that Magic is related to, your career and your life. Magic is this like very creative game, and there's like deck building and, you seem to be someone who takes advantage of that aspect of the game, the deck building side of it, and enjoy it. Is Magic, kind of a creative outlet for you?
100%. 100%, especially when it comes to deck building. And I think it's something that can be frustrating for people as they come to know me as a content creator, because I just love the process of deck building. And I don't expect that all of my decks come out as something good. Again, some very good evidence in front of you here as we play these games.
Our opponent says, hold on, let's see. I don't know what you're playing, but respect.
Good. I'm glad they are amused by what's happening. They can't see the fistful of uncastable spells that we are presently working with. Yep. But yeah, a lot of my sharing of decks is just like, I think this is cool. I think this accomplishes something unique. I think this has potential, or this just makes me laugh and like I'm into this. Those are all reasons for me to share a deck. And I think a lot of content creators, and I'm not knocking this approach, I think it's a very valid approach, are more about, this is the best deck. And I certainly have some of that to the content I produce, but I'm also willing to go the other way and just talk about things more generally. And once people understand that and get on board with it, I do think they appreciate it. But it can be a little jarring from a place that's very focused on just like find the best thing all the time.
Yeah, we played one of your lists last week or whatever. Whenever we did the last episode, we needed a list that felt like Ravenclaw from Harry Potter. So we used one of the recent Mardu thing you posted. I think we played.
Okay, like the sacrifice based deck.
Yeah, the small ball kind of lessons based one and standard.
Yeah, and I think that deck like wasn't very good in that form, but I think the work that that deck has inspired and the place it's getting to is starting to put together something that's kind of impressive in the format. And maybe it needs another piece before it's top tier, but if I hadn't done the legwork of just kind of figuring all this stuff out, I don't think you ever get to the point where you get to see how impressive this archetype could be. So I am very willing to take the L and lose a bunch of games while we try and get things sorted out.
I totally appreciate that about you. And there's like, you're just accepting that this is a process, you know, and you're opening yourself up to, you're inviting people into that process. I have a songwriter friend who, when he does, collaborative songwriting stuff with people, he's very aware that he's going to be the one to, offer up bad ideas. This is Marshall Vore. I should credit him with this. And he's comfortable taking that role because it gets the ball rolling. And it really does. You know, like his idea wasn't the one that stuck, but it's the one that led to the one that stuck. You know, and people are too afraid to have the initial bad idea that starts the conversation. So I really appreciate that aspect of you as a magic, a public magic person.
Yeah, I haven't worked with him myself, but Jerry talks about it all the time. Sam Black is another person who's very willing to work in that same space. Jerry often tells story of Sam being on a Pro Tour team he was working on, and would just kind of do his own thing over in the corner, trying to just suss out these ideas, and would tell people, look, don't really pay attention to what I'm doing. This is probably not going to yield results, but I want to explore this because if it does yield results, then we can get something really exciting happening. I think that's such a valuable approach to take.
And talk about a creative mind in the world of Magic. He's kind of the peak of that for me, where he's just going to do his own thing. He's just such an enigmatic character of deck design.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. And Sam is someone who, the more I speak to him, the more time I spend around the game, the more I appreciate Sam for sure.
Mm.
So, Bryan, you've watched this show before, right? You're familiar loosely with our segment, the Magic the Gathering card or blank.
No, you have to fill me in on this one. Like I have caught several of your shows. I'm going to be honest with you. The way I engage with podcasts is like in and out. I'll catch bits. Sitting down and doing the whole podcast thing again. Active entertainment. Like I have to find a way to be engaged. So I've seen pieces. I've enjoyed what I've seen, but I'm not familiar with this segment.
Okay,
good.
So generally, this segment works that like we will. It's like if somebody's a fan of an artist, we'll pick songs by that artist and then names of Magic the Gathering cards and make them decide if this phrase is a Slayer song or a Magic the Gathering card or whatever. But
okay,
we felt like for you that would be a little too easy, so we took it a step further. What we have here is Taylor Swift lyric or Magic the Gathering flavor text.
Okay.
It's really hard.
It's harder than you'd expect.
I will tell you, I think I have heard every Taylor Swift song ever. There's only like 2 albums that I've listened to a bunch of times. So anything from like early albums, I'm almost certainly going to miss on. And I don't read flavor text. So you kind of found the perfect slot where you can definitely baffle me.
This is something that I don't understand about you as much. You're not like a big magic art guy. You're not a lore guy. Like that part of the experience doesn't get you going at all.
Nah, I mean, so I mentioned the old art being very meaningful to me, but
true.
Not as a composition. I think it just comes down to what I know. Like I said, I've played music my whole life, and so I am very invested in music. I can't draw a stick figure. For whatever reason, I just lack that aptitude. I can't make anything resemble art. And I've often said, like, when I look at Magic the Gathering cards, I don't even see what's depicted.
Right.
I
Jerry's
see them
the same way too. Right?
Yeah, I see them as a blur of colors, and then I recognize the colors. And sometimes years later, I'll pick up the card, actually look at it, and be like, "Oh, this is what's here. I had no idea." And I totally get that. That's weird. I don't know why it works for me. I think it's so like I can save the processing power and just pay attention to other things. But yeah, I think given the rest of my background, I could understand expecting me to identify more with that aspect of things, but it's just never really been a hit for me.
What about sorry, real quick, Cole. What about someone, so there's some like new, really interesting people in the art. Like, what about someone like Seb McKinnon? Does he excite you at all?
I appreciate that all of his art is gorgeous. Like I know it's on another level, and I will take the time specifically to look at his art, but usually at the direction of someone else. Like it's not something I seek out. Someone will be like, look at this art piece. It'll come across my Twitter feed and I'll be like, oh yeah, that's amazing. Yeah. And you know, I have all the respect for the talent of these people in the world. I'm not trying to diminish what they do whatsoever. But yeah, unless I'm kind of driven to it, I just I don't really see it a lot of the time.
Fair enough.
All right, you ready to hit this Taylor Swift lyric or Magic the Gathering flavor text, part 1?
Yes, let's do it.
All right. Careless, like a child with fire, so was I with time.
This has to be flavor text.
This is so hard.
This has to be flavor text.
That's from Teferi on the card Vanishing.
I was going to say it was Teferi related too. Okay.
Okay. You play stupid games, you win stupid prizes.
That's Taylor Swift.
That's Taylor Swift from Miss Americana and the Heartbreak Prince. The things I once imagined would be my greatest achievements were only the first steps toward a future I can only begin to fathom.
All right, that's flavor text. That's a little wordy. I don't think Taylor would drop that.
Be tough to fit in a song. Yeah, that's from Omniscience.
Okay.
All right. Take the words for what they are. A dwindling mercurial high. A drug that only worked the first few hundred times.
All right, that's Taylor too.
Taylor off illicit.
I don't think they would reference. I don't think they would reference drugs on Magic cards. That's what really gave it away.
True. Yeah, they should do that. What are they doing? In truth, her own faith was gone.
Ooh, this is the hardest one yet.
Nice.
We're trying to trick you.
I think this is flavor text.
It's flavor text from Soul's Attendant. Perfect score so far. Okay. Very impressive. Mm-hmm. All right. And if I get burned, at least we were electrified.
Wow. I think
could
that's
be
Taylor.
A red card. Could be a red card.
I think it's Taylor.
That's Taylor from her song Dress.
It did feel a little bit like a red card, though. It made me pause.
Yeah.
Tight, yeah. Okay. I came seeking a challenge. All I found was you.
Taylor Swift.
That, I think, was the hardest one. That's a Magic the Gathering flavor text from the card Utter End.
Wow.
Isn't that such
Good
a Taylor
job,
lyric?
Flavor yeah, it really is. Great job, flavor text writers. You nailed the Taylor Swift vibe. I don't know if that's what you were going for, but you absolutely nailed it there.
They did good. All right, we've got one footstep among many is silent. One footstep alone is deafening.
That feels like Kamigawa era flavor text.
That is from Intruder Alarm flavor text.
Okay, what was the original set on Intruder Alarm? I think it predates Kamigawa, right? That's like Mercadian Masks, maybe?
Yeah. It's Old Border, isn't it?
I think so. I know there's like an 8th edition version, but I'm pretty sure that predates Kamigawa.
So here we go. We got a couple more. If I wanted your opinion, I would have told you what it was.
Oh, that could be either. I think that is flavor text, but I'm pretty low confidence in that.
Well done. That's the flavor text from Stifle.
Okay. One of my favorite cards. Cool.
2 more. If the story's over, why am I still writing pages?
Taylor,
Death by a Thousand Cuts.
All right. I recognize that one.
Last one. You're not my homeland anymore, so what am I defending now?
This is one of my favorite songs on the album. Come on, that's Taylor. That one's easy.
Taylor from her song Exile. That is a hell of that's a flavor text one right there. It sounds so
hell of a song too. That's with Bon Iver, I think, and one of my favorites on the first of 2 albums she put out last year. Banger.
Yep. All right, so you mentioned a little bit earlier, and it's something we've talked on the show about a lot. Is about community building. So in the music world, the industry basically seeks to individualize musicians and like pit them against each other in this idea that they're like in direct competition with each other for like the same opportunities. And in the Magic world, people actually are in competition with each other, and there are only so many Pro Tour top 8s or whatever. So how do you build community in the competitive gaming world? And how can we foster building a stronger, more inclusive community moving forward?
One of the interesting things about Magic in particular is that what we are doing a lot of the time is just so absurd. Like the lifestyle we've chosen to live, the very, very low probability of success events that we'll fly around the country for. And, I think because I do have so many Magic players in my life, I lose sight of this sometimes. But I can bring myself back to an era before where I was, not really forming a lot of my lifestyle around Magic. It was more built around like bars or college or whatever I was doing at the time. So I can go back and think about how I would have perceived what goes on in the Magic community. And it makes no sense whatsoever. Like you can't make EV calculations because you do such low EV things all the time. And you can't really you just can't justify any of it. And I think that commonality is what we all cling to. It's what we always bond over. And it's just like, I get that this makes no sense to anyone else in the world, but you get me. You'll sit across the table 10,000 miles from your home, just like I am. We don't speak the same language, but we'll find a way to communicate because we love this thing so much. And that bond I'm able to form with that person is worth so much more than so many superficial bonds we form throughout our days.
True. Right.
Also, this deck is going off right now. I just want to point that out.
It's going crazy.
Yeah, we're finally having a good moment.
Oh.
We're going to lose, but it still feels really good right now.
Party's over. So, yeah, like you were just talking about, I've heard you talk in other podcasts or interviews you've done about growing up geographically isolated and like how that affected your ability to play Magic at a competitive level. And in the last number of years, we've watched the home of competitive Magic kind of shift from like paper tournaments, which evolved like very slowly, to this like hyper fast world of online play. So like, what are your feelings on the changes in the speed and shape of the metagame with the prevalence of online play, and how do you think this has affected like generally the game's level of accessibility?
I think this is a very complicated question. In some ways, it's overstated how fast the game moves now. I think like that narrative is kind of exciting and appealing, so it's one that we've leaned into a little bit. But that evolution has always been going on. It just hasn't been front and center. It's happened behind the scenes a lot of the time. And then it only gets revealed once every 3 weeks when there's a big tournament. Now there's always something going on, be it an online tournament or just the ladder and Twitch streaming or the Arena Decklist account, tweeting out whatever's at the top of the ladder. There's a lot more exposure. And like many other things in our world, it's now on a 24/7 cycle. And because of that, it feels way more intense, but we're doing the same stuff. And the thing that has absolutely changed without a doubt is just the sheer number of games being played, because the efficiency of producing a game is so much better. Like you needed to have a testing team before, and you needed to have scheduled time to meet in an area with space. And now it's just instant. You're on the ladder, you're playing games, so you get that instant data point, that instant return. So that is definitely happening quicker. It just also leads to a lot of bad data too. And part of Magic advancement is filtering out bad data from good data. And just because there's so much data, the filtration part has become much harder. So Certainly there's more information out there, but your job in getting to the correct information, the core of that information, has gotten a lot harder. And that's why I think that the effect hasn't been as dramatic as a lot of people will tell you it's been.
Yeah, I mean, as the host of a competitive slanted Magic podcast, you're tasked with trying to parse out all this imperfect data. For those of you who don't know, competitive Magic players will go to most recent tournaments and look at what decks won the tournaments and try and collect that information, or there's information posted from these online leagues that we're playing right now, but that information is curated and like redacted almost by Wizards of the Coast, the company that runs the game. So be it deck dumps from these recent tournaments or the constant curated streams being released by Wizards of the Coast, how do you separate red herrings from meaningful, useful information when the data is so curated? It seems like reading tea leaves to me.
It kind of is. And more than anything, I try to draw really hard on past experience and stay true to my own conclusions, because I know the data can get messy, and I know it's not going to be reflective of what's actually happening in the situation. And if I let it tell me the narrative, then I'm going to mislead people. And certainly, like, I can be wrong too, but I'm okay with that result. Like, if I get something wrong, then I can own that. I can tell you, here's why I made this mistake. I didn't consider this, this, and this, and that's why this happened. And that's good. If I just parrot something because it seems like the data points in that direction, then I don't think I've done my job. And I try and stay true to like how I see things. And when I'm going to go just off data, based on the data, this is why I feel this way. Like, for instance, I wrote in a column that I published today, I feel like Jeskai Control is the best deck in Historic right now. Data doesn't point to that. Like, it showed a sub 50% win rate over this weekend's events. But there's a lot of things going on there. The first of which is that a lot of the decks were built really poorly. And just because you call something Jeskai Control does not mean it is Jeskai Control as I perceive it, as I think it should be built. And so when I make that call, despite the data saying, this might be a pretty mediocre deck, I have to have a reason for doing so, and I have to draw off my past experience. Otherwise, it's just worthless. I mean, there's no reason for me to be the arbiter or like the distributor of this data unless I'm going to put my own spin on it, I think.
Yeah, that comes back to, opening people into the process and being okay with being wrong and all this. I mean, there are certain streamers who are like, I'm not even going to acknowledge the data because it's imperfect, but then you're just not, that's kind of defeatist in a way. So I appreciate how you and Jerry still find ways to engage in the conversation and still have meaningful discussions about this stuff.
Yeah, I think that we feel very similar about these things, and that's what allows us to make a consistent show and to feel comfortable putting our opinions out there, is that he's very willing to be wrong. I'm very willing to be wrong. We feel strongly in our convictions. Like, when we believe something, we're going to commit to it, and we're going to tell you about it, whether people are getting on board with us or not. But it always comes from a place of good faith and trying to do what's best for our listeners.
So much of it feels so intuitive in a way that reminds me of music, where people ask you why you make certain decisions. You're like, I can't. It's just intuition from from having spent thousands of hours doing this thing, and so it feels like oftentimes you're trying to teach your listeners about this innate intuition that comes from really knowing a thing and really being in tune with this living, breathing organism that this game kind of can be. So talk a little bit about intuition, honing intuition, what that means to you as a gamer and just as a human being, I suppose.
Yeah, I want to circle back around to something you said, because I think it's a really good point and one that I wholeheartedly agree with. And in fact, I've basically written the same thing. I've written too many articles at this point where I can't tell you exactly where it's from. But
StarCityGames.com.
Well, that is true. That is where you can find it. I don't know which article it is, though, unfortunately. But basically my intro detailed a story about when a friend was living with me, a non-musician friend, and I was putting together a demo at the time, and I was writing songs, and I was playing him the songs I was working on, and he's like, "Bro, how do you write a song?" And I'm like, "What?" He's like, "How do you just pull from space and like create a song where there was not a song previously?" And I had no answer to that whatsoever. I don't know how you answer that question. I just write a song, and I understand what I want to hear, and it's this process of iteration and what feels correct to me. And it's a frustrating thing that I'm not able to give that information back to him and say, this is how you write a song. And there's some of that in Magic too. And there's always things that are intuition. And what I try and do in those scenarios, if I'm trying to impart wisdom that is something I've just internalized as intuition, I try and go very slowly, piece by piece, and actually think about what led me to forming that intuition and like real life experience that says, I played this deck back then, it did this adjustment, and it brought me to the idea that I could do this in this deck. And really inside, it's not that complicated. It's just like, oh, enchantments are good in this format, I better put a disenchant in my sideboard. That's a very simple explanation, but it is not as complicated as having to always come up with a past analog for the experience and insert it here. It's just, I've seen a lot of this stuff before. I've been through it, and I know a lot of times what the answer is.
Fair enough. Cole?
I'm lost where we're at.
I swapped too. So Flux Magazine.
Bryan, what is Flux Magazine?
You are not alone in having no idea what Flux Magazine is. I don't really know what Flux Magazine is, quite frankly. I do know that it was foundational to me finding Magic. It was just like some garbage magazine from the 1990s, and they did an article trying to explain the rules of Magic. I don't think they did a very good job. They broke it down to like 2 pages and talking about like your 5 best commons that you have and your 5 best rares. And I know on the rare list was Ali from Cairo, or Ali from Cairo, and Mirror Universe. Definitely, they had identified as 2 of the 5 best rares in the entirety of the game. Keep in mind, like there's Moxes, there's Ancestral Recall, there's Black Lotus, but this is what we're focused on. And I know 2 of the commons were Drudge Skeletons and Fireball. So this article shaped my perception of play for quite some time when I was first starting off in Magic. But it was just like this weird music, comic, other video games, niche hobby magazine that wasn't around for very long. And when I saw this article, this was after my aunt had come and kind of quickly shown me Magic cards. I don't think I'd even internalized the name Magic at that point. But when I saw this article, I was able to put 2 and 2 together. And I was like, oh, this is what I'm looking for. And it really cemented my quest to go and find this thing and be able to experience it.
Bryan, which arena map has the best music?
They're all awful. I have no music on in my arena account. I wish they would just let me play on a plain tablecloth. I don't want the backdrops.
That's right. You want like a void. You want like a just as spreadsheet as possible.
Hey, I'm right there with you.
Void would be perfect. Just port over the Magic Online background. That would work for me. Whatever you have to do. And it's not that like I don't have any appreciation for the animations. They're fine. And most of the time they're not visually distracting, although some have been. I don't think the current ones are all that bad, but I remember one of them when it first premiered was just mind-blowingly distracting. But it's just that if the program is not optimized and like is setting my laptop on fire or draining my phone battery, it's like I don't need this extra thing. Like take it away and just give me a program that works really, really well and doesn't draw a lot of resources from my computer, and that's enough for me. That's plenty. But instead we get highly animated backgrounds for some reason.
So You said in this interview you did on the Humans of Magic podcast that you feel that you could do commentary for other games outside of Magic. And you had some ideas for something that you could commentate. But what is a sport or game that you strongly feel that you could not commentate?
Well, I, over the course of the pandemic, became interested in cricket. And I generally know how cricket works now. Like I understand the rules. I could probably play a match.
Wait. What sparked this? Where did this? Why cricket? Where did this come from?
I wish I could tell you. I just like I find rules fascinating. I want to know the rules to so many games. And in fact, like growing up, I didn't have friends that played games really, and my parents wouldn't play games with me. And my brother was younger and couldn't really get the games I wanted to play, so I would often just get games and like read them. I would read the rules and think about how they worked, and that was enough for me. Like that, and even to this day, I buy Dungeons and Dragons books. I don't play Dungeons and Dragons. I've never played Dungeons and Dragons in my life, but I have a bookcase full of Dungeons and Dragons books because I think the rule system is really interesting. The whole process of it kind of fascinates me, and maybe one day I'll play, but I haven't to this point. So cricket just kind of fell in that space. I was getting ready for bed, and I think I had just added the ESPN Plus app to a package I had gotten because it was like, if you got Hulu and HBO Max or something all together, it was the same price to add ESPN Plus. And I was flipping around in their archives and watching some old boxing and just seeing what else was there. And then there was cricket. It was a live cricket match. And I'm like, oh, this seems interesting. And I remember I had some conversations about cricket with a coworker of mine. My last legal job, when I worked at Legal Aid, one of my coworkers was from India, and her father's favorite thing in the world was cricket. Just loved cricket. And she shared that with me, and I just asked her, well, tell me more about the game. And she started kind of breaking it down for me and telling me how it works. And I always wanted to engage a little bit with cricket, but it's tough to find. And here it was, my ESPN Plus app. So I checked it out. It's quite interesting. It's a cool, like laid back game. I don't know that I am over the moon about watching it. I really think I would like to play it. It seems like a lot of fun to play. But I don't know that I'll ever get that chance. Maybe I'll find somebody who will invite me into their pickup cricket game. But regardless, I just don't have enough knowledge to be able to successfully call that game and to make it interesting, because it's very slow paced and you have to know like the intricacies of it to really be able to drill down into it. And, you know, it's similar to baseball in that way, but I grew up with baseball and I do know the intricacies of baseball, and I could do my job there, but cricket's not going to work.
Well, also you don't have a British accent, so you just like straight up couldn't.
You're not allowed.
That's one of the cool things about cricket, though, is it's such a global game, and I think obviously it's like the tendrils of the British Empire. That's what spread the game all over the place, their colonialism. So it's got kind of a dark history in that way, like many things associated with the British Empire do. But now it tends to bring together countries that I would say aren't usually interacting in the sports. Like they feel very removed for each other. And I think that's one of the cooler features about it. Like you get to see the West Indies playing against Sri Lanka, and they're both top-notch teams. And that's really cool.
Damn, I'm going to have to check out some cricket.
It's not bad.
Not to bring up something that you possibly don't want to talk about, but you talk a lot about how wonderful the Magic community can be. But I don't often hear you talk about the dark underbelly of the fold-out table tournament scene. Is this something, as a major figure in the Magic scene, you experience less of or more of? And is it something you're at all reticent about due to your position?
So the answer to the second part of that is no. If I see something that I don't think belongs in the Magic scene, I am happy to speak out about it. It's just that my experience with Magic, I think, is so different from so many of my contemporaries because I was, for so many years, an ancillary player. Like when I started doing all this stuff, nobody knew who I was. And to some extent that still holds true. There's plenty of people out there who legitimately have no idea who I am, why I do what I do. I haven't won Pro Tours. I've never even been on the Pro Tour train. I have some small successes. I have one GP top 8, and you compare that to my contemporaries over on Star City, or, my podcast co-host who multiple Pro Tour top 8s, Pro Tour champion, been around the game forever. It's just very different, my exposure to the game, because I was so focused on like doing things outside of Magic and not really participating in the competitive scene. So a lot of it, I just don't get exposed to. Like I don't have those deep social circles rooted in Magic. My social circle, Magic wise, is like Jerry and people I knew way back in the day. And as far as deep connections amongst Pro Tour players, I don't really have them. Like, we know each other now. We're cordial to each other. Certainly a bunch of people I've gotten to know as I've either worked with them broadcasting or, just come across them many times in the same spaces. But I think I was sort of blind to a lot of the problems that Magic had for a very long period of time. And, it's frustrating, because I think so much of my brand is tied to Magic, and I want it to be a place that's like safe for everyone. I want it to be a place that's inclusive of everyone, and it's not. It's not. It has problems. It's always had problems, and I think that what I need to do now is focus on how my role as sort of a figurehead in the community, whether I feel that's appropriate or not. Like, I think I am placed in that spot by virtue of broadcasting and writing. I think I need to lead by example and just shape the narrative around making Magic a better place. And I try and do that. I'm not going to be the judge of my success in that. I think that's for other people to judge, but it is something I care about.
Yeah, I didn't mean to frame that question in the way like you don't talk about it enough. I just wanted to know if it's something. I just wanted to hear you talk about it, because for if you have, I hadn't heard it, so I was interested in that.
Well, one factor to that too is I think that coming from the space I came from and working in the legal community, and especially doing work with underprivileged folks, is that I don't want to downplay anyone's struggles or what anyone is facing, because it is all meaningful, and that's not my intent in making this statement. But people are facing horrible things on a daily basis, right? There's so much poverty and injustice and things that really go outside the Magic community. And that's not to say you give them a pass in the Magic community. If anything, you have to work harder, because the Magic community should be a safe spot from all of that nonsense. But I think a lot of times my focus and my desire to fix things often goes to the broader side of the spectrum and thinking more about systemic issues. And, I'm open to criticism on that. I think you have to find a balancing act and figure out how you can best contribute to making the world you want to live in. And it's not an easy question to answer. We all have to find our own way.
100%. I just want to circle back real quick before we do part 2.
Well, I was thinking, why don't we just do these last 2 questions and then close out on the second segment?
Sure.
I feel like they're related.
Yeah, definitely. But real quick, I wanted to circle back on the being sort of a unknown character coming into the celebrity Magic scene, and how we all subconsciously assign people's worth and merit to like, well, what are their accomplishments on paper? What are the things that this person has achieved that I can point to? So I think we've talked about a lot of the things that I appreciate about you as, a Magic content creator and as a Magic player in general. But what are some of the things that you feel that you bring to the table, maybe specifically as an outsider, or what is it? It's a hard question, because I'm asking you basically to describe what you think your own merit is or your own worth, in a more, what I would think of as a more personal or I don't want to say more meaningful way than just like, tour finishes, but what is it that you bring to the table that makes you feel like a part of the community?
I think a lot of it just comes from my other experiences in life. I've done so much stuff at this point, some of it good, some of it bad, some of it I wish I hadn't have done, but I've definitely lived a life that I think a lot of other folks involved with Magic haven't lived. Be it going through being pretty poor growing up, or going through issues with drugs and alcohol, or going on to be a lawyer and practicing in that field, and like really finding success in the academic world, and being someone who wanted to play Magic but being too busy to play Magic and not having the money or time to do all that stuff. I think those are unique and valuable perspectives. I think it absolutely shapes how I engage with the game. It shapes how I engage with people. And that happens on just like a actually playing the cards level as well. I think my strength as a Magic player, I always say the same thing when people ask me, it's long-term planning. It's being able to see many, many turns ahead. And to pay for that, I do some stupid stuff on individual turns a lot of the times. I just have a hard time, I guess, seeing the trees for the forest and making the right micro actions to get to this larger macro plan I have. But, if I contrast that with a lot of the top tier features of our game right now, I think they often are the opposite of that. I think they're extremely, extremely adept at doing all these micro decisions perfectly, time after time, game after game, just never giving up a point of life anywhere, and maybe lose a little bit on the long-term planning side. Not to say they're not good at that, but like there's a reason I'm able to compete with people who I consider as better than the game than I am. And I think it's a lot about long-term planning and doing that stuff. So I try and bring that to my content. I try and focus on that. I try and let that be the thing that people can take away from my articles. Again, I don't know if I'm successful, but that is what drives a lot of my creative process.
Yeah, I mean, as someone who engages with a ton of your content, I mean, I was listening to the podcast when I didn't play Standard just because I enjoyed the discussions that were going on between you and Jerry. And as someone who engages with a ton of your stuff, I do think you're really successful in that. I just kind of wanted to highlight that in our discussion a little bit, because it frustrates me when it's like, well, where's the tournament finish? I'm like, well, and I just, I guess I'm in accidentally highlighting that aspect of things too, but
no, I think that's fine, because truthfully, one other thing that I will always take credit for, and like, I think it's important that you both claim your strengths and your weaknesses, but in moments where I've had to like compete against the best and buckle down, I feel like I've shown my worth. And it often comes in strange fashions, in places you wouldn't expect. But I had a very successful run when Arena first launched, in arena-based tournaments, where I was kind of crushing it for a while, and I've certainly beaten a lot of the top fixtures of our games. And individual results don't, one win over someone doesn't mean anything, but I feel like I play on par with them when I am at my best. Totally. Now, am I always at my best? Absolutely not. I'm not going to claim that for 1 second. But if I do need to get invested and I find the time to get invested, I do think I can play at a very high level.
Absolutely.
Must be nice.
A blessing and a curse, though, because then when I'm not playing at that level, I'm like, oh, what a disappointment. Why can't I just get it together?
I mean, yeah, even some of those, Magic is a game where it's like you'll be playing a match and you're like 50 minutes in and you play great, and then you make one tiny mistake at the end and it's all over, especially if you play certain, and it's just it's so easy to just beat yourself up for all that stuff. And you've gotten into a lot of that kind of type of discussion. I mean, you had the whole Head Games podcast where you were talking about the more psychological side and emotional side, every different aspect that goes into competitive play. So this is something that you've thought a lot more about than I have. But Cole and I are we're members of a new musicians union, the Union of Musicians and Allied Workers, because of just the obvious chaos and disarray of the music business. It seems that sort of need has come about, the need for a union, that is. But I noticed that there's a serious focus on with you and on the podcast towards questioning the decisions that Wizards of the Coast makes. This is something where you are vocal about things that seem to be not working. Your co-host, Jerry, being one of the most outspoken members of the community against some of Wizards' choices, going as far as to not participate in certain tournaments or withdraw his name from major events. Now, you're not Jerry, but you do seem to share a lot of his criticisms. Is there some real concrete change you'd like to see from the top down in the Magic community? And that's a wide open question, but if you could distill it down to some bullet points, maybe.
The one thing I keep coming back to is that I wish there was just more communication right now. It kind of feels like Wizards have walled themselves off a little bit. And honestly, I get it. I really do. I understand that they are having a hard time engaging with the community. They're not getting what they wanted out of putting forth a public persona. And I get the decision to back away a little bit and just be like, look, let's put up some walls. Let's realize we're creating a product for these people, and we maybe can't be their friends. We can't be who they turn to every time something goes a little bit wrong. And while I understand that perception, it feels like Magic was built on the foundation of mutual trust and us being able to look to Wizards and feel like they are going to give us the information we need to understand their decision making. And some of that just feels like it's evaporating. And I don't think it's malicious. I almost never think something Wizards does is malicious, because I know so many people who are at Wizards, and basically to a person, they're great people and they love Magic. They care about Magic. They want it to succeed. That's so clear if you spend any time talking to these people whatsoever. It's just inescapable. So to insist that they're single-minded or greedy or don't care about the people engaging with their game, it's just not true. That's not what's happening here. They're making risk-reward decisions, and they're trying to maximize profit like every other corporation does in this hellscape that we've created. And it's painful. It feels really bad when the thing you love is a money-making venture. That stinks. There's no two ways around it. That's going to shape a lot of their decisions always, and it's often going to leave you in a spot where you're not getting what you want from the game. So one of the easiest ways for me to see them blunt that impact is tell us that. Be open about it and say, I know this is a decision that maybe is unpopular, but we sold 20 billion of these cards. And, if you want the lights to stay on, this is why we did this. And again, I'm asking for a lot from a corporation because they're part of a publicly traded corporation. And there are tons of disclosure rules that come alongside with that. And I know them very well. I was exposed to it when I was working at a large law firm. They're horrible and they shape everything about these conversations. And it's frustrating because I do see both sides of the issue. I see the frustration from the player base. I experience the frustration as a player, but I know what they're doing, and it's really hard to fault them for it. I just wish they'd take some steps to repair the relationship a little bit, and none of those steps are going to be easy. There's going to be a cost to all of them, but it does feel like things are a little far gone right now, and some of the consumer trust has been eroded.
I just recently... Jeff Hoagland, another big figure in Magic, who's very vocal about his issues, agree with him or not, switched to a different online trading card game and then seemed to have the same issue, new issues cropped up over there and switched back to Magic. And is there, I bring that up because, is there an example of is there a comparison you can make to someone who's getting it right? Is there a company you could think of, like Hearthstone, or is there someone who's doing it well right now that you can point to?
No. And that's the problem. It's like one of the things we say all the time on the show. It's a simplistic statement and it's reductive, but there's elements of truth to it. We like to say you're not mad at Wizards, you're mad at capitalism.
Yeah.
Because all these companies are driven by the same forces. They're all being pushed in the same direction by the same thing, and it stinks. We feel it all the time, and I know how frustrating it can be on both sides of the equation. But I think that's the truth of these situations. All these games, they all have similar missteps. They all do things wrong. There's elements that some games do better. I think like Legends of Runeterra, the Riot card game, their base economy is way more generous than Arena. It's not even close. And even Hearthstone, like they allow you to dust cards. Basically, Arena has the worst economy of any digital TCG, and it's not close. But they also do some things better, and you have to acknowledge that at the same time. And because they're kind of doing this greedy thing in one moment is why they're able to do the generous thing in the next. And, Riot, when they're milking whales for all they're worth on League of Legends, or engaging in suboptimal business practices, or just like generally not caring about sexual harassment at their company, like all this stuff is basically putting more money in their pocket. And so they're able to make a cheaper card game. Like it doesn't equate 1-to-1, but like you do some stuff wrong, it makes it easy to get away with things in other spots. And one interesting point that it really only solidified for me when the pandemic started to really affect business practices. I have never heard the people at Wizards, after they leave, before they leave, while they're there, I've never heard them suggest that they are being worked to the bone. I think they get a work-life balance. And so when you complain, oh, obviously you didn't test this card. Obviously, like you didn't figure this out. How could you not understand Omnath was good? The community figured it out in a week. Well, maybe they let people go home at 5:00 and they didn't keep them there till midnight testing the game. And, so it's like there's always a give and take that comes with these things. And I'm not trying to absolve them of responsibility. Certainly there's been a lot of missteps in Magic over the past couple years, over the past couple decades. They've gotten plenty of things wrong, but you always have to ask why this stuff is happening. I think that's way more effective than just being angry about it.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, something that you mentioned earlier, the idea of like the thing that you love being like monetized and exploited, right? Like that's like the nature of music under capitalism, or like the commodification of art in general.
Course.
They're two like fundamentally opposed forces. So like people tend to ask me as a musician about like the ways in which musicians are able to make a living through our art. And, it's difficult and it's a struggle against like a very unjust industry, but a select few of us are still able to do it. So Lucas mentioned like the union that we're building, the union of musicians and allied workers. So one of our comrades in the union, the violist Clara Takarabe, did this lecture where she described this phenomenon in like the economy of music, where since the capitalist class experiences music in their leisure time, they have this like false expectation that musicians are also experiencing leisure time, like in the creation of their art.
Yep.
But in terms of gaming, gaming is this like classic leisure activity. So can you speak on like the experiences of members of your community who make a living from playing Magic? You know, what's this look like, and how is this sustained?
What was your comrade's name again?
Clara Takarabe.
It sounds like she has already stated it perfectly. I think people see that we play Magic for a living or write about Magic for a living, and it's just a game. It's easy, you know. It's a leisure activity. You can't possibly work all that hard. But I've done a lot of jobs. This is the job I enjoy the most. It's not easier than the other jobs I've done, though. Like being a lawyer had different challenges, and being a bartender had different challenges, but their impact on you as a person, they're the same. Like you're still tired. You're still questioning yourself and your performance. You're still wondering, you know, are you producing your best? You're wondering about your job security. Am I going to be able to do this forever? Am I making enough money? Did I make the right career decisions that have brought me to this path? All the same things apply, despite the fact that you love what you're doing. And again, like that's not a feature of any of the things we're doing. That's a feature of having so much of our lives be driven, dictated, shaped, consumed by work. And I am staunchly anti-work. I think you are not supposed to be spending your limited time in this mortal existence just toiling away. At the same time, I work really hard on things I care about. And it's because of passion, not because of fear. Like I don't ever want to work because I fear losing my ability to support myself or support my family. That's not what humans were put on this planet to do. It doesn't make sense to me. And all those struggles come up, whether you're making music, whether you're painting, whether you're writing about Magic cards, whether you're a bartender. We just all share the same struggles, and it's all rooted in the same problem.
Well put.
Amen. Fuck yeah.
Well, more important than any of that shit, Taylor Swift lyric or Magic the Gathering flavor text time.
Ready for it.
All right. So, Luke, how do you do the first round?
You only got one wrong. Which one was it?
The hard one, I think.
Yeah, just the utter end. I came seeking a challenge. All I found was you.
Okay. We won't.
What's the context on that card? Is that like planeswalkers interacting with each other, or
it's a Doomblade, right? I mean,
yeah. That is 2 colorless, black, white, exile target non-land permanent, I think, and like lose 2 life or something.
Yeah, I don't know what the flavor context is.
We gotta
neither.
Judge.
That's an interesting one. Flavor judge, yeah.
So, all right, you ready for this?
I'm ready.
Okay. The road not taken looks real good now.
That is Taylor Swift.
It's Taylor. We've got hatred outlives the hateful.
I think that's Magic.
That is the flavor text from Rancor.
It's a classic.
Oh, nice. Very cool.
Okay, we've got sorry, I can't see the facts through all my fury.
That could be Magic text, but it feels a lot like Taylor. So
could be a goblin. Could be a goblin.
It could be.
That is Taylor from Happiness off of
the sorry makes it feel really Taylor.
Yeah, I think that's what gave it away. I'm pretty sure.
All right. He didn't have a word for home, but he knew it was something to be defended.
I feel like I've read that on a Magic card before. I feel like this is a widely played Magic card for some reason.
You're right, this is from a Magic card. I think you're wrong that it's widely played, though. It's from Ogre Resistor.
Okay, maybe not. Wait, what set is Ogre Resistor from? Do you have that in front of you?
I don't. I have no clue.
Okay. I mean, this is really interesting to me because I have to share this with you guys because you'll definitely appreciate this.
Sick.
This was during Return to Ravnica block, when, for whatever reason, that was a really, really fun time for me as a Magic player. I made a lot of really good friends. I had a bunch of people I was traveling with, and it was just like completely aside from Magic results or any of that stuff, it was just a good group and we were having a lot of fun together. And one of the things we were doing in that time period was when we did like team drafts or whatever, whenever there were cards to be divvied up at the end of something, a lot of people do what's called the Italian game, where you flip over the card and whichever one has the highest casting cost, then the person with the highest casting cost takes those cards and keep those cards. And that's how you determine at the end of a team draft who gets what. The way we started doing it is we would flip over the card and we would say which of the cards revealed makes a better band name. And with Return to Ravnica, there were some just absolute bangers in that set. Like very, very highly debated, but we always got to a conclusion that everyone accepted. Where there was just 1v1, there was always one of the two that came out with a better band name. And that's how we would determine all the card allocation.
Do you remember any of the band names?
I mean, like Pack Rat was definitely in that set, and I know we all liked that.
Sick band name.
Man, there's one that's so much better than anything else. I have to just pull up the Return to Ravnica set because I know it'll come to me very quickly once I see the card name.
Ogre Resistor is Ravnica Besieged.
Okay, I thought it was like Ravnica adjacent.
Mirrodin,
for sure.
Sorry, Mirrodin Besieged.
Mirrodin Besieged.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Let's see. You guys can go on with more Taylor and Magic cards while I look for the card set and see if I can find a really good one for you.
That's a pro move to multitask these. You know, they're tough.
You got to be able to work on the fly. Yeah.
So okay, here we go. You held your head like a hero on a history book page. It was the end of a decade, but the start of an age.
I think Taylor Swift. Like that's got a lot of rhyming going on. I would assume it's probably her.
Yeah, the rhyming's kind of a giveaway, but it also felt like a parable or something that would be on a. Anyway, that's a Taylor Swift song from Long Live off of her record Speak Now.
All right, Stealer of Secrets is sick. Cremate is sick, obviously. Dead Reveler is another really, really good one. Drain Pipe Vermin, like Ogre Jailbreaker. The hits are all here. Like they just keep coming. Of course, classic Mind Rot. Come on, like that's another slam dunk.
Definitely.
Damn, I've never considered Mind Rot in that capacity. Very good.
Not
Lucas
bad.
and I have been in a competition for like the past 2 years to have a song named after a Magic the Gathering card.
Neither of us have done it.
Well, there's a lot of bands where I've often seen that pop up, like famously Death Grips, right? Like they have said that is based on the card Death Grip, and it's
really?
not an accident. Yeah, 100%. There's an interview somewhere. I don't know the gentleman's name from the band, but he talked about the context of like metagaming music, and when music does one thing, your job is to do the other thing, and like just pulled it directly from Magic.
Wow.
Yeah.
I had no idea.
Yeah, search for you'll find it somewhere, and it wasn't like a small platform. It's like a Rolling Stone or Spin interview or something where
I have to get them on the show.
Yeah, that would be a good one for sure. And then my friend has a band called Vile and Rank, and there's a little hint of Magic influence you find in their song names from time to time.
Sick. All right, the next line we've got is you understand now why they lost their minds and fought the wars, and why I've spent my whole life trying to put it in words.
Yeah, this feels like some Urza pontificating stuff. So I'm gonna go with Magic here.
Taylor off of
No!
You Are in Love from 1989.
Oh, come on. That's so dramatic, Taylor.
I tried to read it in a way so it broke up the like rhyme scheme.
No, it was good. You did a really good job of that.
Tight,
you definitely got me.
All right. The land promises nothing and keeps its promise.
This is a Magic card, and I feel like I know which one.
Go for it.
Primeval Titan?
That is Wasteland.
Wasteland. Okay. I knew it was something I had played a bunch for sure.
Your faithless love's the only hoax I believe in.
Taylor
from Hoax. I could build a castle out of all the bricks they threw at me.
That feels like Taylor too.
Damn, you're good. It's Taylor.
she's got a clear vibe. I mean, like she is she feels very persecuted. She certainly struggles with love. Like all these things are very real in her life.
Yeah. That's true. All right, we got 2 more. Invincible is just a word.
Magic?
That is the text from Oust.
Okay.
All right.
Very good.
Last one. Someday someone will best me, but it won't be today and it won't be you.
I think that's magic again.
Fucking, you're good, man. That is magic. That is from the card Last Word.
It's so strange because, like I said, I don't feel like I read flavor text, but when you said some of these, I'm just like, I've heard that before, and I don't know if it's just like by osmosis, like holding the card in my hand hundreds and hundreds of times, and I look over it, but yeah, a lot of those they just rang in my ears for some reason.
Yeah, it's just your subconscious.
Yeah,
you only got 2 wrong out of I don't know how many.
I think that's pretty good.
That's incredibly strong. That's like as good as anyone has done. Or
nice. I mean, it does help that I know more about magic than most of the people y'all interview on a regular basis.
Yeah, but we threw a little twist in there and made it harder.
Sure, like that's true.
For Sully, we showed him album art or magic art.
Oh yeah, it was like pretty like 70s prog record cover or fucking magic card.
How did he do? Because I feel like he just knows the art of like every magic card.
He got more wrong than we thought he would, but he got most of them. He got most of them right.
They were, and I like cropped the art, so that it wasn't. It was a tough segment, and like some of like look at this shit. Look at like guttural response right here. This is like straight up, just like a 70s prog album cover. I mean, like all the shit is a Johnny. Like it's crazy.
A lot of those vibes going on. I'm going to request if I ever come back on the show, I want to play that game. That's my request.
Easy. It's a good one. It's a good version.
Yeah, I think that's interesting. Because I've seen a lot of magic cards, but I am curious if I can like do the color blob identification thing when they're taken out of context.
I was going to say that sounds harder for you. You said you just kind of look at them generically or,
That is true, but I recognize them very quickly doing that. Like I'm looking through this Return to Ravnica spoiler now, and I just like very quickly know what all of these cards do by parsing over their blur of colors very quickly.
Sure.
I don't want to speak too soon, but I think I have the Sully ones. Should we try one?
Yeah, give me one if you have them readily available. I'd like to see. Maybe I'm overvaluing my skills here.
While you're looking, Cole, I wanted to ask before we wrap up, why? I know you're starting to do this sort of live version of the podcast where you engage with people in real time.
Yeah.
But there was a minute where you guys were streaming games against each other. But you were playing Brawl for some reason, which why isn't there more? I loved that content when you were. I have never played a game of Brawl in my life, but I watch it just because it's fun to watch you guys kind of interact in that way. Why is there not more of that kind of content? Seems like an easy slam dunk.
Are you saying from us specifically?
Yeah.
Because we're both head cases.
Okay.
What it ultimately comes down to. I mean, it's the same reason neither of us streams. It is draining for me to be on camera. And I think people are often surprised to hear that because I'm on camera a lot. Like I broadcast. And then if I'm not on camera, I'm speaking a lot. And I think people assume that people who fall into these kind of roles are like the gregarious, outgoing personalities that are comfortable being on display all the time. But I'm not. Neither Autumn Willow. Come on, you got to do better than that.
No, that's just the first in alphabetical order. Hold on. Whoa. All right, let's see what we got.
He nailed that one too, I remember. He just immediately...
he's from the same era as I am. That was a great card in 1996 when Homelands came out, so... okay. I think this is a magic card, but I'm not super sure.
That is the Hawkwind album, Space Bandits.
Wow.
Yeah, we got him on that. We got him. I remember we got him on that. He thought it was Elves of Deep Shadow, I think.
Yeah, it looks like Elves of Deep Shadow or like Altar of Bone or something. I think it kind of looks like. All right, I admit I can't do this. I would say Magic card again, but I have like a 10% confidence.
That is the OC's album Face Stabber.
Wow. Wow. Yeah.
Check out the OCs; they're great.
I don't know what to do. Like if I don't recognize it, maybe I'm just like, if I don't 100% recognize it, maybe I'm just supposed to say it's an album cover. Like that's the safe play.
Right. Okay.
That is the safe play in this game.
Let's
Any
try-
iteration of the game. That's the safe.
Well, actually, now maybe I'll just say, like, if I say it's a Magic card, then you'll know. But some of these are like hell of Prague album.
Oh, this is Deathspark from Alliances.
It is Deathspark.
Look, there's an era where I just know everything. Like I promise you, I will be able to identify the vast majority of Alliances. Like Deathspark was not a widely played card or a meaningful card in any way, but my obsession at that level with Magic was intense. So stuff like that pops out to me.
Totally.
You got one more, Cole?
All
Or
right,
shall-
try one more. Let's see what we got. All right. See, I wish I could see a
No,
preview so I
We're,
could.
we're hitting
know.
the hour 45-minute here point, so we don't want to keep you too long. We will we'll
Well,
wrap up.
this is what happens every time I produce any content whatsoever. Like Jerry and I set out to do an hour podcast every single week. That's always our goal. 1 hour. We just think it's the sweet spot. Ooh, this looks very like RK posty, but I don't immediately recognize it as a Magic card. So I guess I'm supposed to say this is an album cover.
This is, I think, the card Soul Collector by the artist Matt Wilson.
Wow. So I didn't even have the artist right.
Really sick art.
Fucking hard.
I don't know that I'm familiar with Soul Collector. Maybe that's the problem. Interesting. That's a good game. I like that quite a bit.
It's hard.
Yeah.
It's cool. You get to see some cool art too. Yeah.
Right. This is Sarah Sanctum.
Yeah, iconic card. Hell of Prague though.
Yeah. Very albumy for sure. Yeah, I feel like I'm like 3 tangents deep at this point. I think I was talking about why we stopped doing content.
Right. You were
videos.
Yes, you were saying that it's not always that it's draining to be alive all the time. I mean, Cole and I, we are, I guess technically we're performers, but both of us just doing this show once a week are exhausted by it. So
yeah,
you can kind of get that.
Yeah, and I mean, at this point, I would classify myself the same way. I guess I'm a performer. I've done plenty of live broadcasts in multiple avenues, but when we are done recording the podcast, I have a headache. And with playing games of Magic, it's even more intense, right? Because I'm in this deep state of focus and trying to balance that with interacting with chat. And I could see myself coming back around to the idea of doing some variety streaming and just playing video games, because I do have a deep appreciation for video games. I think I could have fun doing that. But most times where I have streamed Magic, it has not been fun for me. The exception is tournaments of reasonable stakes. I think just the adrenaline of trying to get a good finish takes over at some point, and sharing that with an audience is pretty cool. But yeah, for the most part, just the daily ladder grind streaming, not for me whatsoever.
Fair enough. Totally get it. Cole, is there anything you'd like to add before we wrap up? We haven't won a single game, have we?
We haven't won one game. So
I'm not surprised.
So yeah, all right. I'm gonna concede. I think this is maybe my first time with the perfect
a perfect no game.
05 010.
I am so glad I was able to bring that to the table for the first time.
There was some abysmal plays, but it's
what's interesting is that I'm pretty sure you could just be participating in the 2008 standard format and come out with the same result. So it's not even a problem with playing modern.
And only one person commented "Wow, what's
what
happening the fuck
here? Why
everybody
are you
else
doing
is
this to yourself?"
Yeah. Everybody else is just click, gonna beat you. So
gonna
anyway,
get those tickets.
that was
I liked watching the plays where you'd take 2 damage off your lands and play a kitchen finks. That seemed to happen like
That's why they're
really
there.
often.
Now you understand the deck building genius here. Is yes, your lands may not produce the mana you want. They may damage you for half your life total, but you have kitchen finks to make up for it.
there was that one game where we got like the 6-for-1 against Heliod with this Pyroclasm and lost.
Again, that's why we play Pyroclasm in our Birds of Paradise Bloom Tender Figure of Destiny deck. It's just good deck building. Yeah.
It's just classically good deck building.
Still finished strong with it though.
We did. I'm impressed. I'm glad that the show has a 05 010 under our belt.
And I'm happy I can be the one to provide it. It means a lot to me.
Yeah, thank you so
much.
much.
We can't
Bryan.
pretend to play even remotely good Magic while we have someone of your stature in our presence, so we might as well.
Yeah, playing prowess with Sully was a horrible idea. But I love prowess decks, so it was I just kind of wanted to see that.
Our other deck that we thought of playing is this deck right here.
This is a good one. We might have won a game with this one. This deck was so far ahead of the field when I built this. We were just me and 3 of my friends who nobody knows who they are. They're not Magic players. We showed up to like the first 5K of this format, and all of us top 8'd with this deck. It was sick. It was just easy. Yeah, we were so far ahead of everyone else.
I ate extreme shit with this deck and was like, I'm just gonna play like the Naya aggro deck. I don't know what I'm doing with this guy right here.
Yeah, a lot of little value points here, and still like this isn't gonna line up well with the modern format either. But in that standard format, it was impressive.
Can imagine, man. Bryan, thank you so much for coming on our show.
Thank you for having me. I had a great time. It was a pleasure talking with you both about music, life, the horrors of capitalism, all that good stuff.
Is there anything you want to plug before we wrap up? I feel like we've covered most of your things.
I'm over that. We don't need to plug anything.
Use our massive platform.
Y'all either know what I do or you don't care, so that's fine. I'm fine with either result.
Okay, great. Well, thanks everyone for hanging out. Cole, would you like to play us out, and we'll see you all next Monday?
Play us out with some Deranged Strangler. Thank you again.
Strangler.
Shout out Deranged Strangler.
Sounds like a Ravnica card.
It does, yeah.
Thanks everybody for tuning in. Thanks everybody in chat. What's up, Edgar? Goodbye.